Less than 8% of all people alive today have blue eyes. Every single one of them, whether they live in a small fishing town in Norway or a quiet street in Kabul, traces their ancestry back to one person, one mutation, one moment. This happened somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. Modern DNA now shows us where this person lived. It reveals what they look like. It also explains how their descendants spread across continents. This changes much of what we thought we knew about ancient Asia and Europe. The answer is not where most history books told us to look. Blue eyes are not just a color. They are an accident, a genetic glitch. It is like a single misspelled letter in a very long book of genetic code. That letter has been copied billions of times over centuries. It passed down through bloodlines that crossed mountains, deserts, frozen rivers, and entire seas. To understand where blue eyes truly came from, we first need to grasp something strange about them. They are not technically blue at all. There is no blue pigment in a human iris. None. What you see when you look into blue eyes is not pigment, it is light. The same physics makes the sky appear blue even though there is nothing actually blue in the air above us. The iris of a blue-eyed person has almost no melanin in its outer layer. When light passes through that tissue with its low pigment, it scatters. This scattering produces the color we call blue. This effect is called Tyndall scattering. It is the only reason blue eyes exist. If blue eyes were just a random quirk appearing wherever someone had low pigment, you would expect them to pop up all over the world. But the genetics tell a very different story. In 2008, a team of researchers at the University of Copenhagen started looking for answers. Led by a scientist named Hans Eyberg, they spent over a decade tracing the genetic origin of blue eyes. They studied the DNA of blue-eyed people from dozens of countries. From Jordan to Denmark to Turkey, they found something that seemed impossible. Every single blue-eyed person they tested shared the exact same mutation. Not similar, not related, but identical. This was a single, tiny change in the DNA. It was located near a gene called OCA2 on chromosome 15. This OCA2 gene normally controls how much melanin the iris produces. The mutation does not shut the gene off completely. It turns it down just enough to drain the brown out of the eye and let the light scatter into blue. This finding was extraordinary. If blue eyes had appeared independently in different groups, those mutations would have different genetic fingerprints. But they do not. The DNA of every blue-eyed person on Earth tells the same story. There was one original mutation, one single human being born sometime between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. This change first appeared in them. Every blue-eyed human alive today descends from that one person. The Vikings, the Irish, the Russians, the Afghans, the Uyghurs, the Greeks, Israelis and Brazilians with European ancestry. All of them, one ancestor, one bloodline, carrying one tiny error in the genetic code. A single piece of human DNA that changed the world. This raises the question, if all blue eyes come from one person, where did they live and what did they look like? The idea that blue eyes came from Northern Europe was a common one. After all, countries like Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Denmark, and Iceland still have over 50% of their people with blue eyes. It seemed obvious that the mutation must have started in the cold, dim forests of the European North, where pale features became more common over thousands of years. But ancient DNA tells a different story. When scientists looked at prehistoric skeletons, the genetic trail went somewhere else entirely. Not Scandinavia, not Ireland, Germany, or Western Europe. The answer is not where most history books told us to look. The true origin point was the northern shores of the Black Sea. This means the grasslands of modern Ukraine, southern Russia, the Caucasus Mountains, and the Central Asian steppes. This region, sometimes called the Pontic-Caspian steppe, is where the journey began. What makes this even more surprising is what these first blue-eyed people look like. They were not pale or light-skinned. The first blue-eyed people in human history had dark skin, very dark. Take the Logroño man, for example. His skeleton was found in northern Spain. He lived 7,000 years ago. This hunter-gatherer had blue eyes, but his skin was as dark as a modern Central African. He lived in Europe, but he did not look European in the way we imagine today. He was a mosaic of features that existed in Eurasia long before the lighter-skinned farmers arrived from the Middle East. Those startlingly blue eyes and a dark face were the original combination. That is how blue eyes first appeared on Earth. A similar discovery came from the British skeleton known as Cheddar Man. He lived about 10,000 years ago in what is now southwest England. In 2018, his DNA was sequenced and his face reconstructed. The results shocked the public. He had dark brown skin, tightly curled dark hair, and pale blue eyes. This image shattered every assumption about what ancient Europeans looked like. It confirmed that the early carriers of the blue eye mutation were not the blonde, pale ancestors of modern Scandinavians. They were dark-skinned hunter-gatherers. They had migrated from further east, closer to the heart of Eurasia. We can imagine that first blue-eyed child, born to a hunter-gatherer family. Eyes unlike anyone else around them. We will never know their name, their voice, their gender, or what happened to them. But we know they survived. They grew up. They had children. And over the next 1,000 years, the mutation spread. Slowly at first. Then faster as populations mixed and migrated across the open grasslands of Eurasia. But the descendants of those first blue-eyed people did not just move west into Europe. They went east too, deep into Asia, across the Tian Shan Mountains, into the Tarim Basin, down through the high deserts of what is now western China. And the ancient genetic traces of that journey are still clear today. You can see them in children born with startling blue eyes thousands of kilometers from any European city. Travel through the highlands of Tajikistan, into the Pamir Mountains. These peaks rise like a white wall between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. There, you will find people whose features surprise outsiders. Tajik villagers, especially in the upper Pamir, often have blue eyes and light hair. Their skin tone looks like neither European nor East Asian. These are the Pamiri people. They are an ancient group who have lived in those mountains for thousands of years. Their DNA carries strong signals from the same ancient steppe populations that gave Europe its blue eyes. Most Pamiras have brown eyes, but when blue eyes appear among them, it is not a foreign import. It is an original signal, a piece of the same genetic inheritance carried east instead of west. The same is true for the Waki people. They live in the mountainous corridor where Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China meet. They also carry the blue-eyed gene. The Hazara of central Afghanistan, partly descended from Mongol soldiers and partly from much older Iranian peoples, sometimes carry the blue-eyed gene too. This is especially true in their more isolated mountain communities. The Uyghurs of Xinjiang in western China are another example. They are a Turkic people. Their DNA shows a mixture of European, Central Asian, and East Asian ancestry, stretching back thousands of years. Among the Uyghurs, blue eyes appear with surprising regularity in some families. This is particularly noticeable in the southern oases of the Tarim Basin. Here, ancient mummies have been found with remarkably European features and red or blonde hair, perfectly preserved by the dry desert air. There is one population that often surprises people who hear about the eastern reach of the blue-eyed gene. In the remote valleys of the Hindu Kush Mountains in northern Pakistan lives a people called the Kalash. Their population is small, only a few thousand left, but their genetic profile is striking. Many Kalash have light skin, blonde or red hair, and pale blue eyes. They speak an ancient Indo-European language. They worship pre-Islamic gods. Their DNA shows a strong connection to the same ancient steppe ancestry that produced blue eyes in Europe. Some have even claimed they are descendants of the soldiers of Alexander the Great, but the genetic evidence points to a much older origin. It goes back to the early Indo-Iranian migrations of nearly 4,000 years ago. The Kalash are not a recent intrusion into Asia. They are one of the surviving fragments of a much older world. These scattered blue eyes across Asia deepen the mystery. How did these diverse populations get the same gene? The mummies found in the Tarim Basin date back 4,000 years. They were buried deep within the Taklamakan Desert in what is now western China. When scientists finally sequenced their DNA in 2021, the findings were a surprise. These mummies were not recent European newcomers. They were the descendants of the same ancient North Eurasian population that shaped so much of Eurasia's deep ancestry. This meant they were not Europeans who had simply wandered east. Instead, they were the local outcome of a much older genetic story. A story that began before Europe and Asia were even meaningful categories. This story linked the Pamir Mountains, the Tarim Basin, the steppes of Kazakhstan, and the shores of the Black Sea. It created a single ancient web of human ancestry. Blue eyes were a part of that web. They were not a European trait carried into Asia, nor an Asian trait carried into Europe. They were something older than either. The mutation had appeared in a population ancestral to both European and Asian groups. Now, let us look at the mutation itself. This is the single change in the DNA that started this entire story. The gene is called OCA2. It is responsible for making melanin in the iris. Normally, OCA2 produces a healthy amount of brown pigment. But next to this gene is a regulatory region called HERC2. It acts like a switch. This switch can turn up or down based on the genetic instructions written next to it. In the original mutation, sometime around 8,000 years ago, a single letter in this HERC2 regulatory region changed. It was not in the OCA2 gene itself, but in the switch that controlled it. The switch partially turned down, less melanin was produced. The iris then scattered light instead of absorbing it. The result was the color we now call blue. This explains why blue eyes are so genetically stable. Every blue-eyed person on Earth carries the exact same mutation. The change was so small, so specific, and so unlikely to happen twice in the same way. It was a 1 in a billion accident. And once it appeared, it stayed. This raises a question. If the mutation was so rare, why did it spread so widely? But why did this mutation spread? Blue eyes offer no real advantage. They do not protect against disease, and they do not help people survive in certain climates. So, why did this rare change survive and multiply for thousands of years? Scientists have debated this for decades. One idea is that blue eyes were simply attractive. In the small, isolated groups of people after the last ice age in Eurasia, novelty itself became an advantage. A child born with blue eyes stood out. People noticed them. They remembered them. This made them more likely to find a partner and pass on their genes. Other researchers suggest the blue eye mutation was linked to other useful traits. Maybe those other traits, not the eye color itself, were what nature favored. Another theory points to genetic drift. This is the random spread of a harmless trait through a population. It happened to spread at a time when human groups were growing fast during the early days of farming. We may never know the exact reason, but we know the outcome. The mutation spread. It kept spreading across Eurasia as people moved, traded, mixed, and married. Here is something else to think about. When the blue eye mutation first appeared, it would have been incredibly rare. One child, one family, one small group of hunter-gatherers. But ancestry compounds backward in time. Anyone with ancestors from the steppe migrations, anyone with even a small bit of ancient North Eurasian or Yamnaya heritage has a chance of carrying that mutation. This chance has multiplied over thousands of generations. Blue eyes are most common in Northern Europe today. This is not because the mutation started there. It is because the groups carrying the mutation eventually settled there in larger numbers. They lived in more isolated communities. This allowed the gene to really concentrate. In other parts of Eurasia, where populations were bigger and mixed more freely, the mutation diluted. But it never disappeared. It still shows up in unexpected places. Think about what it means for a single mutation to spread to nearly 500 million people across the globe. Every modern blue-eyed person carries a direct, unbroken line of descent from that original ancestor. If you trace a family tree backward 200 generations, you theoretically have more ancestors than there were people alive on Earth at that time. This means the same individuals appear over and over again in your family tree. They contribute to your DNA from many different angles. The blue-eyed ancestor is one of those repeating figures. They are not just one forebear, they are thousands of times over. Their genetic signature has folded back into your bloodline through countless paths. This is why the mutation is so stable. It is identifiable across populations, separated for thousands of years. Think of a Pamiri village in Tajikistan. A grandmother there might have eyes the color of a glacial lake. A Uyghur child in Kashgar might surprise visitors with eyes that look like they belong somewhere in Scandinavia. A Hazara boy in the Bamiyan Valley, surrounded by mountains, might carry the same eye color as an Irish farmer thousands of kilometers away. These are not coincidences. They are not the result of recent European contact. They are echoes. They are the faint, persistent signal of a single ancient ancestor. Their blood still flows through millions of people across the entire Eurasian continent. Modern population genetics has gone even further. Researchers have sequenced thousands of ancient skeletons. This allowed them to map the migrations that carried the blue-eyed gene out of its original homeland. The Yamnaya people, who lived on the Pontic-Caspian steppe between 5,000 and 3,000 years before the Common Era, were one of the great vectors. They were pastoralists. They had domesticated the horse. They invented the wheeled cart. Their culture of mobile herding allowed them to expand in every direction. To the west, they spread into Europe. They contributed to the ancestry of nearly every modern European population. To the east, they crossed into Central Asia and the western fringes of what is now China. They carried their genes, their language, and their distinctive traits along with them. The Yamnaya carried the blue-eyed gene in significant numbers. Wherever they went, they left traces behind. This is why the gene shows up in places that, at first glance, seem unconnected. The British Isles, the Iranian Plateau, the Indian subcontinent, where ancient steppe migrations contributed to the population that would become known as the Indo-Aryans, the Tarim Basin, the Pamirs, the Caucasus, the Balkans, the Levant. All these regions received some portion of steppe ancestry over the past 5,000 years. Along with that ancestry came the eye color that had begun in a single child on the grasslands of Eurasia. The story of these powerful Asian populations who carried the blue-eyed gene further challenges our notions of who these ancestors were. The Asian people who carry the blue-eyed gene today are not some small, isolated group. They are the descendants of some of the most powerful peoples in human history. Take the Scythians. They ruled the Central Asian steppes for over 1,000 years. Their ancient burials in modern Kazakhstan and Mongolia reveal skeletons with blue eyes and reddish hair. Then there are the Tocharians. Their mysterious cities in the Tarim Basin were vital trading posts along the Silk Road. We have found their written records in languages closely related to Latin and Celtic. Other ancient peoples like the Sakas, the Massagetai, and the Wusun also carried this genetic inheritance. It is the same inheritance that gave their European cousins blue eyes, and their descendants still live in the high valleys and wide plains of Inner Asia today. The Tocharians offer one of the strangest stories in all of human history. They lived in the Tarim Basin, in what is now Xinjiang, from about 2,000 years before the Common Era until the early medieval period. Linguists have been able to read their languages from manuscripts written on birch, bark, and palm leaves. When these languages were finally deciphered in the early 20th century, they turned out to be Indo-European. They were more closely related to Celtic and Italic languages than to any of their closer neighbors. How a people speaking a Western Indo-European language ended up on the edge of China, thousands of kilometers from where their language family began, remains one of the great mysteries of ancient migration. The answer almost certainly lies with those same steppe ancestors. They carried the blue eye mutation eastward thousands of years ago. So, if you have blue eyes, your ancestry is not as simple as you may have been told. It is not just European. It is not just Western. It reaches back through layers of history most people never see, deep into the heart of Eurasia. It connects you to the steppe nomads. It connects you to the mountain people of the Pamirs. It connects you to the desert traders of the Silk Road. And it connects you to the hunter-gatherers of ancient Siberia. Your eye color is a kind of map. It is a faded, ancient map that points east as much as it points north. It reminds us that the human story is far more entangled, far more connected, and far more shared than any single national or racial category can ever capture. There's something really humbling about this. Every blue-eyed person alive today shares a common ancestor, not figuratively but literally. A real human being lived and breathed about 8,000 years ago. They walk the world somewhere along the edge of the Black Sea, or perhaps further east, on the Central Asian grasslands. That person is your grandparent, going back a few hundred generations. They are also the grandparent of every other blue-eyed person you've ever seen. In the ancient world, the color blue itself was treated as something sacred and rare. The Sumerians imported lapis lazuli from the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. They traveled thousands of kilometers to bring the stone back to Mesopotamia. The Egyptians ground it into pigment to paint the eyes of their gods. Many ancient languages, including ancient Greek, didn't even have a clear word for blue. Against that background, The appearance of human beings with blue eyes must have seemed almost otherworldly to the people who first encountered them. Imagine seeing blue for the first time in a human eye. It would have felt like something from another place. The next time you look into a pair of blue eyes, anywhere in the world, you are looking at the legacy of that single ancestor. It is a piece of a story that begins in a place most history books never mention. A story that connects the Pamir Mountains to the Irish coast. It links the Tarim Desert to the Norwegian fjords, the steppes of Kazakhstan to the villages of Wales. This story is written in your own DNA. It passed down quietly through centuries. It survived wars, famines, and migrations that erased whole nations from the map. Blue eyes are not just a feature, they are a piece of ancient history that you carry inside you. They are a signature left by an unknown ancestor whose face you will never see. It is a reminder that the people of the past are not gone. They live on in the smallest details of the people who are still here. Every blue-eyed person on Earth is a direct descendant of a single dark-skinned individual from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. Their mutations spread through ancient Eurasian migrations. This challenges modern notions of racial and geographic origins. If you found this journey through genetic history fascinating, consider subscribing for more stories written in our DNA.